Good morning. Today is December 5th, 2023, and this meeting of the Council Subcommittee on Water Issues is being called to order. And first of all, I'd like to recognize our Mayor, Phil Good, is in the audience. Thank you. Hi, Phil. Roll call, please.
Member Rusing,
Here.
Member Gambogi.
Present.
Let the record show that Member Fruworth is excused.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Okay. Selection of chair for the Subcommittee on Water Issues to serve through November 2025.
I've been the chair for the last 2 years, and it has been a very wonderful and fulfilling position. I would definitely volunteer to be nominated as the chair for the next 2 years. So, do I hear a motion? Let me repeat, Mr. Gambogi, do I hear a motion to nominate the chair for the Water Issues Subcommittee?
I move to nominate Kathy Rusing as chair.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Rusing, if you can just give my staff a minute to get the system going.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
We're voting
Thank
just
you.
like we do in a council meeting as we do usually, okay?
Okay, thank you. Sometimes we do the vote.
Passed 2-0.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, sometimes we do have to do the votes orally, or sometimes mostly we do them electronically, but sometimes we do them orally. So thank you. Okay, next item.
Approval of the November 7, 2023 Water Issues Subcommittee meeting minutes.
Do I hear a motion?
I have a question for staff. I was not on the committee at the time, so are you confident that the minutes presented accurately reflect what was covered that day?
We have, I looked them over, but just this morning, there was a little bit of comment that I received on some of the issues on the presentation that was given. Would it be possible for us to pass the meeting minutes at the next item or at the next meeting? Would that be possible so we could clear up a little bit of the
I'm
information?
just curious why that wasn't caught in the 4 different steps of the workflow that it went through.
Yeah, I'll take the credit for that. There was just a few wordings that were done and didn't represent exactly what was placed online, and we want to make sure for the record that gets cleared up. And also, we were wondering how the minutes were going to be reviewed by new members who weren't at that particular meeting. So if it's possible, we'd like to clear that up at this point, make sure that the meetings do represent accurately what happened in that meeting with that presentation.
Thank you, Brian. Those are very good points. So I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the minutes until the approval of these minutes until the corrections are made and resubmitted. I believe we do not have a meeting in January, so it'll be in February. Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second it.
Passes 2-0.
Thank you. Next item.
Presentation and discussion regarding the January 2024 to June 2024 residential and non-residential water budgets in accordance with the 2022 Water Management Policy, Policy Number 11.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Reese. I'm the Water Resources Environmental Services Manager for the City of Prescott. What I would like to request is that if we could take the order and do agenda item number D before doing number C, I think it will help with the flow of those two items a little bit better. My understanding is that we could, as long as you're okay with it, we can go ahead and do it in that order.
Thank you.
The 2022 Water Management Policy discussion, current residential and non-residential water budget overview for July 1st, 2023 through November 22, 2023.
Okay, so for the 2022 Water Policy 11 through 13 establishes a semi-annual water budget for residential and non-residential projects. The budget for July 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2023 for residential was set at 25 acre-feet. And also the budget for non-residential for that same period was set at 25 acre-feet. So between July 1st, 2023 and November 22nd, 2023, there was a total of 7 residential projects approved. I should make sure. Sorry, here we go. I want to make sure that I'm on the, there we go. Yes, we're on the residential table as you see up on the screen. So a total of 7 residential projects were approved. 6 of these projects were underneath 1 acre-foot per year in water use and were administratively approved. One of the projects was above that threshold and was approved through this WIS committee and through council. So for this period, the total water use for all 7 projects totaled 2.7 acre-feet, giving a remaining budget of 22.3 acre-feet in the period. I wanted to note that during this period on November 22nd, the project, there was a 90 unit apartment complex that was approved by council on November 28th. This project, when it came to WIS, went through had to go through an appeal process because the water that they were requiring was over 50% of the remaining budget at that point in time. So they appealed through and was approved through WIS and approved through the voting. Per the water policy, that water isn't added to the budget. And because it came after the when these tables were published online on November 22nd, it's not included on these tables. So I just wanted to note that that project's not included here, but it's going to be discussed in my next presentation on D. So,
Brian,
yes.
in our handout, we have different numbers on there. What changed?
Different numbers on the tables? I'm not aware of any change. Can you tell me which number was
We're on
different?
item D. We skipped item C, and that we're doing the overview first. Page 20 of 23 is the chart.
Brian, that's my mistake. I was on the wrong page.
Okay, no problem. Okay, and then for July 21st through November 22nd, there was a total of 8 non-residential projects approved in that period. all of those projects were below the 1 acre-foot threshold, so all of them were administratively approved. And the total water approved for that period was, in that period is 2.58 acre feet, with the remaining 22.42 remaining within that budget period. So per water policy, or between that period, excuse me, between the period of July 1st and November 22nd, there was a total of 25 projects approved administratively under existing contract. Per water policy, these existing contract projects do not come out of the budget, and the total approved in that period is 4.33 acre feet. Almost all of these projects are just single-family residential underground water subdivisions. So with that, that's kind of a summary of the water budget in this period that I have for you today. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Thank you, Brian. I have a question. Going back to the residential projects where we had the appeal on the 90-unit apartment complex. So where it says total remaining 27.30, that number will be adjusted then in our next discussion here.
Per the current water policy, if an appeal is approved through council, it does not get removed from the budget, from the actual 25 budget. It's part of our policy at this point in time. So my goal is to make sure that you understand that water was allocated in that period for a full understanding of the full allocation. But my tables for residential will not depict it per policy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Brian, I want to comment, you mentioned the administrative approval of the groundwater homes, and those were 19 homes were approved in groundwater subdivisions. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay.
So are we moving to C now?
Next item, please.
Presentation and discussion regarding the January 2024 through June 2024 residential and non-residential water budgets in accordance with the 2022 water management policy, policy number 11.
Okay, thank you. So yes, per city adopted policy in 2022, the document sets the guidelines for property owners to receive and deliver water from the city. Policy number 12 sets the budget for residential use, and policy number 13 sets the budget for non-residential use. So as part of the policy, the city's website is modified to include the information regarding the current water budgets. This information is updated on the city website on the first and the third Wednesday of each month. Hence, that's why the tables stopped on November 22nd previously. So projects do not reduce the amount of the water budget until they are either administratively approved for permitting or approved through City Council voting. So for the period of July 1st through December 31st, the water budget was set at 25 acre feet. In that period, there were 6 administratively approved applications, quantified at 1.05 acre feet of water, 1 and 2 councilly approved projects at 1.65 acre feet of water. Giving the total of 2.7 acre feet shown on the table. So the water remaining in the budget after this period at this point in time is 22.3 acre feet. Noted on the bottom is the appeal water. So on November 28th, repeal request for 11.78 acre feet of water was approved through the council. So in this period, the actual allotment of water given was 14.48 acre feet. Per policy, that wasn't removed from the water budget. So the water budget officially maintained at 22.3 acre feet through this period. So this constitutes about 11% of the budget used in this period. However, considering the allocation, it would be higher. So, and then in non-residential, 8 projects, all administratively approved, were, 8 projects administratively approved for a total of 2.5 acre feet, and the city approval should have been a 1 there instead of a 0, obviously, of 11.44 acre feet, giving a total non-residential budget of 14.02 acre feet allocated in the period, and a total of 10.98 acre feet left after this at this point in time. So this constitutes about 56% of the water budget used for that period.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to say, so we're here to approve both residential and non-residential water budget for the next 6 months.
For the next 6 months. So, so recommendation at this point would be 25 and 25 acre feet per water policy. And yes, that's what we're looking at doing is approving the budget for the next period. And yeah, I'm sorry, it should be more clear. The tables that I'm giving you represents the water that was used in the last period in order to give you an understanding of how that budget accounted for with the water approvals that were given out in that point in time. And then the next table that I'm presenting right here will give some potential projects that could come through the next period. So you could see what might be on tap for that period and how it might relate to that 25 water budget that is proposed.
And I just want to clarify, Chair Roosing, you're not approving the budget. You're making a recommendation
Thank
to
you.
forward it to council for approval.
Thank you. It's just a recommendation.
So this table right here shows potential projects, non-residential and residential, that could be coming up in the next 6-month period. Towards the bottom of the table are projects that have started up in the last period, but for one reason or another haven't made it through to either being approved administratively or going through the WISP process, but may come up in the next period. At the top of the table with the higher PAC numbers. So those are preliminary application conferences that were had with the projects when they first come in, so that we could review their staff can review their project and give them recommendations on what might be required for their projects and help them move forward more efficiently when they come in for their permitting. So those are some of the notable projects that we saw that may have an impact on, or a bigger impact on water, or even ones that may not have that big of an impact on water, but that may move through on this period. Again, just to give you an idea of what may be down the line, it's not set in any way. Some of these projects were actually on my list in the previous 6-month period, and they didn't move forward through that period. So it's just a guideline and trying to let you see what we see as potentially coming down the line as you're making your decision on the recommendation for the budget for the next period.
Well, thank you. I just would like to comment on our potential residential Embry-Riddle Residence Hall, 200 dorm rooms, 30 acre-feet a year. That pretty much exceeds our budget.
Yeah.
Just one project.
With one project.
We have another one, 144 apartment units at the mall. That'll be 18.3. So we're pretty much going to be depending on a lot of appeals. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's possible. So even with last period, we had a couple of projects that potentially right at the beginning of the time frame would have created appeals right at the start, and none of those projects came to be, and we didn't have an appeal until just last month. With another project, which we did not have on our radar as would have been appealed. So it's hard to determine. There's so many different factors that go involve in whether a project is going to move forward or not. But yes, with those projects mentioned right there, they obviously exceed the threshold for and would require appeals if they were going to move forward.
Yeah, and it's no secret that Embry-Riddle is really expanding their campus population there with the students in order to mitigate our pilot shortage, and they're also expanding their program at the airport. So it seems to me that would be a project that would definitely, in my opinion, warrant an appeal and support too for our community.
Brian, what do those numbers add up to?
What was the numbers on the tables? Or
For the potential residential.
I didn't have it tallied up on here, but it looks, and I'm sorry, but yeah, it looks like it. I mean, the potential is shown to add up to what, over 60 plus acre feet at this point in time. Does somebody have the number, or?
I think Leslie has the number.
Leslie, you have to.
65.8. 65.8 is what we're seeing there. So, but again, I think my table from last period probably was fairly similar in that amount, and a lot of variables. I'm not saying we couldn't see that it might not happen, but we are experiencing somewhat of a slowdown in the permitting center right now. That's the trend right now. So I would think that that's probably going to continue through the next 6-month period. That would be my best guess.
And I would also recommend that we work with Embry-Riddle and their 30 acre feet of water. That seems to be pretty generous, actually, when you compare it to like an apartment.
So what will happen is when they actually submit for their water service application, we'll review their demand calculations and work with them to make sure that they're doing them appropriately, and that we feel that the water demand is actually representative of their water use.
And I don't know, do you know if they're going to plan on another swimming pool?
I don't know. I haven't reviewed their PAC application for that specifically. Not sure at this point in time.
Okay, because I know
think they had a lot of dorm
They
rooms.
have one out there already. Okay, thank you. And also, I'd like to comment that our potential non-residential looks like it is remaining within our budget.
Yes, yeah, definitely based on some of the projects that we have privy to what may be moving forward.
Yeah. Commercial generates our sales taxes and provides amenities to the community with using very little water.
So if there's not any other further questions, I just wanted to make sure that the recommendation would be to move forward with the residential and non-residential water budget for January through June 2024 to council as recommended.
Okay, let me make a motion. I move that we keep both budgets, residential and non-residential, at 25 acre-feet per year for the first 6 months of next year. Do I hear a second?
So again, I just want to clarify that the motion is to forward to council the residential and non-residential water budgets from January 2024 through June 2024.
Yes, thank you. It's just a recommendation.
Chairman Rusing, may I make a motion?
Yes.
I move to forward the residential and non-residential water budgets for January through June 2024 to council as recommended.
Second.
Passes 2-0.
Thank you.
Presentation and discussion regarding Governor's Water Policy Council.
Hello again, and yes, today, so we're going to do a presentation to cover the Governor's Water Policy Council for you today. Before starting that, excuse me, because we have some new members on the committee, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our water resources management staff, in case you have not met them before, and let you know who we are. So we're a small staff, so this won't take very long. But I wanted to introduce Kay Sito. Kay, can you go ahead and raise your hand? Yeah. So Kay's a member of our water resources team. Kay's been with the city for about 3.5 years at this point in time. Kay is a certified floodplain manager, and as a small staff, we cover each other pretty well. We basically work on a lot of different things together, but some of the things Kay's specifically responsible. She attends all of the NAMWA, the Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association's meetings, and helps cover ground on those. She covers the Groundwater User Advisory Council meetings for the Prescott AMA area, and she also attends almost all of the CA1, our Comprehensive Agreement Number 1 meetings, which is our partnership with Prescott Valley and SRP on Big Chino Subbasin issues. Kay is also heads our water conservation rebate program. So she will be providing several presentations probably over the next few months that will update you on the rebate program and let you know what's happening on that front from the city's perspective. So amongst a lot of other tasks. So And then second, we have Leslie Gracier here with us. So Leslie is just coming up on 14 years with the city. Leslie also worked for over a decade with the Arizona Department of Water Resources and various other experience. So she has a huge water background. For the city, I think I explained Leslie as a utility player in our last meeting. I think that definitely describes it, but she does also provide the city a lot of a lead on a lot of tasks and a lot of different items. Leslie was a former technical advisory committee member for NAMWA. She relinquished that role to me so that I could be involved with NAMWA more and get it up to date with that organization, which has been great. But still, she represents us on the technical advisory committee for the comprehensive agreement number 1. And all their efforts on modeling and monitoring, they meet at least once a month in those efforts. She's also the chairwoman of the Groundwater Users Advisory Council for the Prescott Active Management Area. So she's involved in that council, obviously. And Leslie is the lead for our decision and order through our designated assured water supply with Arizona Department of Water Resources. Leslie's also taken the lead in helping the city create and enhance the water resource management model. So amongst a lot of other things, but those are some of the bigger projects that she's worked on. So I wanted to introduce everybody, make sure that you knew who we were, and we're always open for questions or anything that we can help you with in terms of water issues.
Well, I would just like to thank our water resources team for all the time and effort that they've put into this. Water is so important to us, and I feel like we're in good hands.
Well, thank you. I hope. Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to our presentation, I'm going to try to keep track of time here. I got about 27 minutes. I got 35 slides. It's a long presentation, and I think it's a really good presentation for this time period with new members of the WIS subcommittee. The Governor's Water Policy Council is taking on some of the bigger issues in the state to try to make recommendations to the governor, and some of the proposals and recommendations they made do affect the Prescott AMA area and Prescott specifically. So with that, we'll start moving forward. Or backwards, there we go. Okay, so this presentation is going to closely follow some of the recommendations in the last governor's water policy meeting. It was held on November 29th. It provided final recommendation for the Assured Water Supply Committee and the Rural Groundwater Committee pertaining to wildcat development and the structure of rural groundwater management framework and measuring and reporting. In subsequent meetings, the Assured Water Supply Committee also provided proposal and recommendations for wildcat subdivisions and build-to-rent development. So we'll cover those aspects too. So presentation overview, I think kind of went over it, but we'll start off with the formation of the council and the council objectives, and then we'll move into the two committees that were split up amongst the council members for assured water supply and for rural groundwater. So back in January, under executive order, Governor Hobbs created the Governor Water Policy Council by appointing 28 members to this council. There are 3 legislatures involved and representatives from 5 tribal communities. Council duties, in a nutshell, update groundwater tools and protect groundwater, which at this point encompasses about 41% of our state's supply. So I'm going to start off with the Assured Water Supply Committee. So the council as a whole was split into 2 different committees: Assured Water Supply and Groundwater Management. So we'll start off with the Assured Water Supply Committee. So this shows just various organizations and legislature and municipalities that make up the committee. There's 15 total members on the Assured Water Supply Committee. I'm going to follow along here because I'm make sure I hit this. So here are their overarching objectives for the Assured Water Supply Committee. Protect the strength and the integrity of the Assured Water Supply Program. Enable future growth without reliance on mined groundwater. They, in their recommendation and proposal, may not reduce the 100-year requirement for the Assured Water Supply Program. And they cannot increase the depth to which the groundwater may be pumped. So those are things that are off the table. Must ensure that water is available before growth, and must protect consumers. So those are their overarching objectives for this committee. When they started off, they were looking at about 30 different items that they could propose on and make recommendations on. Narrowed it down to, at this point, 3 different proposals. So we'll go over those 3 proposals. The first one being alternate path to designation proposal. So basically, you'll hear this one also referred to as a alternative designation of assured water supply, or ADAS. So you'll hear that acronym being thrown out. What is the proposal? The proposal is to help provide utilities and small municipalities to pursue a designation of a 100-year assured water supply that have been facing hurdles in doing so. Those hurdles include legacy groundwater use that predates the assured water supply rules or fall outside of the subdivision definitions, limited renewal supplies, and barriers to securing those renewable supplies. In a nutshell, smaller municipalities have been struggling to find the resources and the financing to obtain alternative water supplies, and it's a pretty costly and involved effort to go through the application for a designated assured water supply. The city of Prescott, by the way, has a designated assured water supply at this point in time. But this would help other smaller municipalities kind of get a pathway through it that doesn't have to follow the full rules and the full regulation of the of a designated assured water supply as a whole.
Thank you, Brian. I would just like to ask, I don't see conservation up here. Is the conservation element included in any of these committees' tasks to solve our water shortage problem?
Yes, so conservation is going to be covered a bit when we get to the Rural Groundwater Management Committee, and in their framework, they have identified conservation as one of the key components of their program. So that will be coming up. In terms of this assured water supply, conservation wasn't mentioned specifically, but I think in the underlying designation rules and regulations, once they get this alternative path through there are conservation efforts that are mandated through the Assured Water Supply Program, and I do believe that they will be held to those just like any other designation. So these bullet points list the various facets of the alternative designation pathway. So I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, and then we'll go through an example to show kind of how they work within this alternative proposal. So you got existing groundwater demands. Physical availability is a requirement of a designation of assured water supply. And it's specifically addressed in this proposal. Also, groundwater volumes. Existing groundwater demand, so consistency with the management goal. I'll kind of explain that a little bit more in detail. New alternative water supplies. This will be what we're trying to bring in to these municipalities so that they can, so they don't have total reliance on groundwater. expedited modification for incremental growth. This is another portion of this proposal, and designation terms and ability to modify. So with this, I'm kind of go through an example of how this designation would go through. So a undesignated provider at this point, maybe a city or a town, who doesn't have a designation of assured water supply, wants to obtain one. And through various groundwater commitments that they have, certificate or non-certificate, they're required to pump 20,000 acre feet a year of water. That's their groundwater that they use at any point in time. So, or not at any point in time, but as of 2021 is when this designation proposal pathway would start. They would take the groundwater pumping that would happen in 2021, and so in this instance, let's say it was 20,000 acre feet of water. So the city would go through and they would apply through this alternative designation. They first would go and they would find alternative supplies. So let's say that they were able to generate or secure or 8,000 acre feet of alternative supplies. Maybe they have an open water source that they could create a pipe to, and they want to improve their effluent treatment so that they can recharge into the groundwater system. So with that, they can get a total of 8,000 acre feet of water. So with this proposal, what would happen is through that physical availability and that grandfathered groundwater volumes, the Department of Arizona Water Resource would allow them to attribute 70% of that new alternative water supply for growth, and 30% would go to reducing their groundwater need. So basically, the Department of Water Resources would issue a groundwater allowance for this community of 16,400 acre feet. If you take 70% of 8,000, their new alternative water supply, that 30% of that is 2,400 acre feet. That would go towards reducing use on groundwater. So they do give them a groundwater allowance of 20,000 acre feet, what they use every year, minus that 2,400, 17,600. The rest of that allowance could go towards growth for the municipality, and they could move forward. They'd have to show that they've secured the financing and and all of the necessary things to bring aboard that alternative groundwater source, but that's how they could move forward. So at the end of the program, they get a groundwater allowance for 17,600 acre feet. So they would have a designation. In that 100-year period of their designation, the groundwater would have been reduced by 2,400 acre feet a year, or 240,000 acre feet over that 100-year period. Also, because they're bringing in an alternative water supply now that's being recharged, the unplenished aquifer is also being replenished. So there's an additional benefit to the aquifer in that way. So that's basically how this program would work. Excuse me. It would also, yes, Councilperson.
I have a question. So this will help communities that aren't assured water suppliers become assured water suppliers.
Yes, that are in AMAs, in active management areas.
In AMAs only. Okay,
Exactly.
thanks for mentioning that.
Exactly.
And is there any limit on community size? I mean, could a community of, say, 10 people in the AMA do it? Or is there a limit on population?
I did not see any limit on size or population. It would probably just be more limited on the realities of what that size population could accomplish in terms of bringing in alternative supplies and their need for a designation of assured water supply if it makes sense for that size community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and then let's say that in a couple of years, this community was able to, had the ability to obtain another alternative supply. Maybe there was another lake, but they would need to provide some piping or something like that in order to get through. That expedited modification of incremental growth would be a component of the program that allows the Arizona Department of Water Resources to give them an expedited modification to their designation, allowing them then to use, let's say they brought in another 2,000 acre feet of water in alternative when the project was built, but it's going to take 4 or 5 years to build the project. They could get this modification on their designation so that they could bring that water supply into their designation. 70% of that water supply now would be able to be utilized for even more growth in their community, while 30% would then continue to decrease the groundwater use. So that 17,600 acre feet of groundwater allowance previously established now would reduce by another 30% of the new alternative resource that's brought in. So if that was another 500 acre feet, then their groundwater allowance would go down to 17,100 acre feet. The point being that as they're bringing new alternative resources in, the department on this proposal wants to ensure that groundwater is being reduced at those points and being pumped less and more reliant on the alternative sources coming in. So this is the recommendation, pathway to move forward on to the governor's consideration recommendations, including all those components. I thought I had another slide there that had a summary on them, but not really. But anyway, that's basically the ADAW's recommendation to the governor at this point. Again, it's for areas inside active management areas. It's for municipalities who are struggling to obtain a designation of assured water supply, but they want to move off of total use or most use of groundwater and move in alternative resources to their supply. And this is a pathway that could help them do that if they're struggling in the conventional way.
So, in this case, like for example, Prescott Valley could apply and become
Yes.
an assured water provider?
Yes, excellent example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ryan,
Yeah.
you talked about some hypothetical alternatives supplies. Did they discuss what might be actual alternative supplies?
Yeah, the ones that were thrown around, effluent, treated effluent, surface water supplies, and transport water supplies, which usually means water that can be transported legally from one groundwater basin to another.
Via pipe or truck?
I would assume pipe. It wasn't, those details weren't specifically discussed, but I would assume that mostly it would be infrastructure that would move groundwater from one from a legal transport basin to an area where it could be used. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the second recommendation. And I see I need to speed up a little bit. But the second and the third proposal are both actually kind of tackle the same issue. So the Wildcat and the the build to rent proposals, we'll take them on separately, but their purpose is pretty close. Residential developments that do not meet the definition of a subdivision, provide regulation to halt the circumnavigant of assured water supply requirements, and provide consumer protections consistent with development in assured water supply subdivisions. So that's the goal of these recommendations. We'll start off with Wildcat development proposals. So the components of this proposal strengthen the subdivision laws by clarifying that any entity, individual, or combination thereof with any ownership of 6 or more lots offered for sale or lease in one or more adjoining sections of land is evidence of acting in concert. So And then second bullet point, apply civil penalties to each lot instead of an unauthorized subdivision as a whole. So hitting the first of these slides, this is kind of the crux of the Wildcat subdivision problem. One of the biggest ones you hear about is Rio Verde down in the valley.
In Scottsdale.
But it was Scottsdale in conjunction. The problem is that by circumnavigating the subdivision law, which states that if you're going to subdivide 6 or more lots, you have to go through the subdivision process. Developers or people who own more properties can develop them in piecemeal, creating basically a subdivision at the end of the purposes for all intents and purposes in terms of water anyway. You're using the same water, you have the same water issues, but allowing those developments to occur and causing those issues. So we'll go over a little bit of detail of how they're looking at tackling this acting in concert, which is the definition of kind of creating your subdivision in this manner, or your non-subdivision that acts or really feels like a subdivision.
So they're trying to close the loophole.
They're trying to close the loophole. Very good. So into doing that, they're going to look at enacting a definition for contiguous, and the current recommended definition is that contiguous would be defined when evaluating for nearby lots constituting a subdivision, using one or more adjoining sections of land, so a section of land is 640 acres, as defined as a geographic area for considering whether lots are considered contiguous. Clarifying that lots separated by streets and roads are contiguous, but retaining the current definition that county, state, and federal highways, natural and man-made barriers that divide lots are non-contiguous. So the graphic here kind of tries to help project this. If this was a section of land right here, the current statute would not identify those would identify the 5 orange parcels as being commonly owned, but would not really consider the 3 other parcels within the section in the determination. So with this, what would happen is that the total ownership within that section, or even adjoining section, so if there was an adjoining section that actually had ownership too, those ownerships would all be counted up. And if it was greater than 6, then the clarification or acting of concert definition would come into play, and they would be able to mandate the subdivision requirements.
Brian? Is there anything on that chart that adds up to 6?
Currently, there's no, but with the new definition, it would be construed that those 8 parcels are a geographic area that could be considered for subdivision requirement.
Brian, do we have any Wildcat subdivisions here in
So, yes,
Yavapai County?
In Prescott proper, I can't name them, but I know that we have Wildcat type subdivision processes happening all through Yavapai County.
Okay, good.
So, continuing on, the next part of the proposal provides the counties and municipality authority to collect information at the time of building permit, and require that the subdivider to obtain a subdivision public report based on ownership findings. So those would bring in for Wildcat subdivision same rules as subdivisions. Actual subdivisions are required. This right here deals with the timing issue. At present time, the Department of Real Estate can act on some of these issues with our current statutes, but they can't act on them until the properties are offered for sale or lease, and that creates a lot of issues with actually addressing these concerns because the developer has expended all of their financing, their costs moving forward on this, and to come in at the end of the process and say that there's a problem, that's what's happened all the way throughout Rio Verde. When I was reading through there, is that at that point the cat was out of the bag. There was no way to stop it. So this is looking at bringing up the requirements, or allowing the Department of Real Estate to look at these issues of whether a subdivision is required per the previous contiguous definition at the time of a building permit. Hence, at the beginning of the process versus the end of the process, where then it can be dealt with in a better fashion.
So in other words, all the current Wildcat subdivisions are going to be grandfathered in, so that when they need to start hauling water, they're going to have to start hauling water.
As far as I could tell from my review of the meetings, we were talking about policies that would move forward with building permits. I did not hear anything specifically regarding existing subdivisions and how they would be dealt with these new statutes. I could look into that a little bit more to see how that would impact them. But what I got out of this is these are policies for moving forward with new building permits and new projects. So council recommendations, I'm sorry for the slide being so small, but basically this is just a summary of the slides that we had before. It's strengthening the subdivision rules by clarification and trying to find evidence of acting in concert. The definition of contiguous in terms of two or more adjoining sections. And applying the civil penalties. I didn't get into that one as much as I wanted to. Right now, if you had, back on the slide that we were showing earlier, if you had a situation where you had 8, like these 8 orange parcels that were considered as acting in concert, and there was an infraction, the infraction would be $2,000. It's per infraction. Whereas with the new recommendations, the infraction would be per parcel. So instead of $2,000, the infraction would be $16,000 because there's 8 parcels. And the thought on this is that the current infraction penalties are not going to persuade anybody from going this route because the profits are worth it. And then the last is looking at the ability for the Department of Real Estate to go ahead and move forward with these, with recognition of the need for subdivision regulation at the permitting stage versus at the end of the process.
Brian, before we move on, I would like to ask, is there any pending legislation to require a disclosure to the potential buyers in a Wildcat subdivision, to disclose to them that they're in a Wildcat subdivision?
I have not heard of any legislation for that, and looking around at staff members, they say they have not heard of any either.
Thank you.
Build to rent proposal, and I'll go through this one quite a little bit quickly because it's a lot of the same issues. We do have a build to rent subdivisions in Yavapai County, and I do believe ones have come through the city. So it is an issue that directly impacts us.
They're known as horizontal apartments.
Horizontal apartments, yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's the crux of it, is how you where you define a traditional apartment and a single-family residential that's just being built to bypass water regulation. So defining residential lease community, 6 or more detached residential dwelling units on 1 or more lots, parcels, or fractional interest is pretty consistent with the Wildcat subdivision rules we just saw just earlier. And then offered for proposed for lease without regard to lease terms and length of lease. So at this point in time, the loophole would be that if you're offered for a year or less, then it is not considered a subdivision. It's not applicable to the assured water supply. the proposal would do away with that, so they would have to be on the same playing ground with any other subdivision. For purposes of the assured water supply, yeah, the rent to lease community is the same as a subdivision. The city and the county may approve a building permit for a rent-to-lease community within an active management area if the units have obtained a certificate of assured water supply or have a written commitment of water service from a designated municipality or a private water company. So again, this rule just basically means that they're on the same playing field as a traditional subdivision. So here's the recommendation moving forward for build-to-rent or rent-to-lease communities. These changes to ensure that that these communities are under the same protections as the Assured Water program and are on parity with subdivisions when it comes to assured water supply. Okay, and I know I'm short on time here. I'm going over, so I'm going to move through this as quickly as I can. Sorry, I took a little longer than I should have. The rule,
Brian?
okay, so now we're on the governor's water policy rural groundwater committee.
Excuse me, Brian.
Brian,
Yes,
it's okay. We're learning, so.
okay.
It's been
But
fascinating.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On that, so you covered the first section. You're going into the second section.
Correct.
Right? Does anybody estimate like how much water we're going to save in total over some period of time? Like we save 20% over 10 years. Is there any numbers in here?
There was no numbers that I saw. There was no tables. If there were, I would have definitely put them into here. This is the first of a very long process, if any of these recommendations will actually end up in statute. And I was going to go through this at the end, but it's probably good right now with your question. So at this point, ADWR is going to go into what they call an informal rulemaking process, and they'll draft some rules. After that period is done, it'll go into a formal rulemaking parcel through the legislation. It's going to take 6 to 8 months. In all of these meetings, there was definitely resistance and concerns about various aspects of every one of these recommendations I went through and the ones I'm going to go through right now. There's a lot of work that still has to go in order to get a consensus of where things should fall. Example, the section requirement of adjoining as being the section as being the geographical size, extremely concerning to some community, to some of the counties in Arizona because of just that size of the of geographical area and the way that their ownership is laid out. They're just afraid that it's going to hit pretty much every single section within their jurisdiction that's looking at developing, and it's just going to be a big problem for them. So they, we at the last meeting, it was probably talked about for 30 to 40 minutes. The fact that a section size may be too big, it should be maybe a quarter section or even smaller, and so a lot of details to pull out of this. And I think once maybe those details start to get clarified, then maybe there'll be a better look at to see what type of water savings, what kind of conservation could be obtained from these recommendations. Okay, so Rural Groundwater Committee. They are made up of the other 16 members of the total council, all the various organizations and government institutes. Ron Doba from NAMWA, who has kept us quite filled in on this, and we're lucky to have him, was sat on the member of the Rural Committee. Okay, their goals and objectives: develop policy, legislation, and actionable recommendations to the governor. Assist with rural communities in managing their local groundwater, protect water users, and manage the aquifer sustainably. I'm going to move to this slide right here because this kind of shows in a shell. And I'm sorry for the size of this, this map being hard to read, but it was used in the slide presentation that they had, and it kind of in a nutshell shows areas in red, areas in hatched are all areas of aquifer depletion happening with all around the rural parts of the state. So areas outside of active management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas have a lot of issues right now, as I'm sure you guys are fully aware of, in terms of the unregulated pumping that can happen in their areas and how it can impact existing wells.
Would a perfect example of that be the foreign company that came to the valley and was growing alfalfa and exporting it to feed cows to make yogurt?
Yeah,
Is that an example?
That would be an example for it. And then there's a lot of other ones where wells are dropped down, and all of a sudden, huge wells with incredible pumping capacity, and it impacts other people who and livelihoods that are in the area. So, definitely. What this committee did is they are proposing a framework for a rural groundwater management areas. And that's what we'll go ahead and cover. These areas would cover areas that are not included in active management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And for the record, this is extremely important to us because we're in an Prescott AMA, but unfortunately our Big Chino Water Ranch is outside our AMA.
Correct.
In an unregulated area.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Correct. Designation of rural ground management area. So these are the various components of the plan. ADWR initiation criteria, local initiation process, hearing and designation, and interim pause. So ADWR initiation criteria, the recommendations is that that the director of ADWR would be responsible for initiating the designation of a groundwater management area. That petitioning process could be through a couple different mechanisms, but that are still kind of being pieced out at this point, whether it's going to be a petition through a petition of residents in the area, a certain portion of them, or is moved forward by other authorities. Local initiation process. They want to make sure that that the councils that are formed for these local management areas have local representation and represent local interest. Hearing and designations, the process would follow something similar to the designation of INA's irrigation non-expansion and active management areas. So they would follow similar proceedings in how those designations go. And then there's interim pause, which is at the extent of when a designation is being activated, there would be a pause, a moratorium on water or well drilling, such that you would not have basically a spike in well drilling because of a potential designation in an area. So trying to get wells drilled before that designation happens and the effects that could happen with that. Acknowledgement of existing uses. So this was one of the framework's consensus statements by the committee, is that there needs to be an acknowledgement of existing use. Need to document the current and historical groundwater users in the RGMA. The process to establish this acknowledgement should move more streamlined than an AMA application. So basically with this framework, they're trying to do processes that are not as onerous as required in a full-fledged active management area. Subject to conservation, they need to be efficiency measures and other actions identified in the management plan need to be achieved through the area's goals. So, and then a flexibility for water users and a local economy achieving goals. So a flexibility, one of the more kind of complicated aspects of the framework, and I think it still needs to be laid out. But being able to have water exchanges, ability to take a credit for effluent recharge and some of these other things that could help, I think, the local community obtain the goals in this is where they're kind of going at.
Brian, I was going to ask you, one of the things about being outside the AMA is you don't have to have a metered well. Was metered wells versus unmetered wells addressed? Because it's a pretty strong lobby, a lot of resistance to having a well metered. And it's not like by putting a meter on it, they're telling you can't pump. They're just trying to collect data. Correct?
It is addressed in the framework proposal. It is probably one of the most controversial and most challenging aspects of the framework at this point in time. Users, especially for agricultural, maybe other users too, are very sensitive about reporting their water uses for various reasons. But one is because is definitely the competition that they're creating their technologies and everything to enhance their product. It relies on their ability to be innovative, and that was one of the representatives who represents the agricultural industry talked at length about why they would really favor if there was a way that they can keep their individual uses from becoming public knowledge. Is there a way to do that, to incorporate the data into the modeling and into the measuring that trying to accomplish with the framework, so that we could measure progress and understand how to make better decisions, but at the same time not have individual uses being out there for public record. So that's one of the big, if they could get over that hurdle, I think a lot of the agricultural community, or at least some of the agricultural community, would feel a lot better about these recommendations.
Yeah. Because many people like to live rural, and the person out there with 10 acres and a cow and a garden isn't the problem. It's these huge foreign corporations that come in and are unregulated and can pump an aquifer dry if they wish.
Yeah, definitely, and in general, huge corporate farms and other big water users that will move out to a rural area because of numerous financial incentives of being out in that area. So council duties. The framework provides that they'll have for completing records and proceeding. In proceedings that are open for public for review, cooperation with tribes, local cities, local water providers that could include private water providers, irrigation companies, any other providers in the area, and state and federal agencies within the area. Coordinating with Arizona Department of Water Resources in creating goals for the management plan. The goal, there needs to be at least one goal for a rural groundwater management area. It can be more, but they would coordinate with ADWR to make sure that those goals are representative of the community and the needs of the area. Recommend and send out goals and management plan to the director being the director of ADWR, and ADWR would have final approval of those goals and management area plan. Optional duties. There are various other optional duties that were defined, quite a few of them, but those optional duties allow for the council to do what they need to do in order to run their rural management area as best they can. So it could include things such as hiring a consultant to come on board and give them advisement on how to move forward with their goals in their management area, and various other aspects in that realm. So each rural ground management area, it has to have at least one goal, and they need to be consistent with the local area. And the council must draft up and recommend the goals in consultation with ADWR. So again, they're collaborating with ADWR pretty much along every step of the way. Area management plans shall include one or more management goals approved by the director, description of physical and socioeconomic conditions, summary and conditions of other relevant management plans in the area. So if there's other management plans already in the area, they need to take those into consideration. Methods for monitoring and reporting progress towards goals, measures, and annual reporting for non-exempt wells. Rules governing well locations, and mandatory water conservation program for all sectors, which again, that actually was fairly controversial, and it's going to be a big challenge moving forward. The management plan may include other water management practices and programs within ADWR statutory authority deemed appropriate for the area, and recommendations, but not mandates, supplement water conservation and management actions to implement by cities, towns, water providers, and other agencies in the area. So again, this the thought process is that this council could make a recommendation such as low water fixtures should be used in all new commercial and residential buildings. It would not be a mandate, it'd be a recommendation that could be then taken up and mandated by a local city or town in their code.
Brian, I have a question. In the news lately, there's been a lot about reclaimed water. It used to be called toilet to tap, but now it sounds a lot more palatable to be called it reclaimed water. Is that a big part of this new strategy here?
There was not a whole lot of talk about, and I think the term direct potable reuse comes to play, and then advanced water purification, thank you, is kind of the new term that you'll hear for that process too. Not a whole lot of talk in this committee about that particular subject in any of the meetings that I reviewed.
Because I don't think too many people, the public, know that the nuclear power plant uses wastewater for cooling, and also the new Taiwan chip plant is going to be using recycled wastewater.
Okay. So council membership, they've decided that the council will be no less than 5 people and no more than 9 people. No more than 1 member may reside outside of the area, the management area. Membership should represent all major water use sectors, and council must include at-large members to meet specific needs of local economic population and water users in relevant sectors. The appointment process, again, members must be appointed. They're going through right now how that appointment process, or they're going to leave that to in the next stage to fine-tune that process. They're looking at generating list of recommended individuals based on their qualifications, and appointments must be based on a knowledge of, interest in, or experience related to, and the development or use of water in the area. Members are to serve a 5-year term, and member terms are staggered, which raised some questions too, how you stagger us.
Brian?
Yeah.
Do we have any membership on any of these?
No, none of the, we're in an active management area. So the rural groundwater management framework would not specifically apply to us because we fall within that boundary. We already are regulated by ADWR pretty stringently. And this is to try to help areas outside those areas get some rules underground and see if they can control their pumping. Another aspect of this is a sunset and review clause. So basically, what they've come up with at this point is every 10 years, the director shall review the designation and consider if the designation still needs to exist or not. So if the director determines the area goals have been achieved, he can rescind the designation, and it will follow the same notice and hearing practices that are used in the initial designation process. And unless the rural ground management area is rescinded by the director, the council shall renew and either recommend or re-adopt the existing area management plan for an additional 10-year term, or recommend a new management plan. So the sunset clause basically is to kind of look at a program, see what's working, see what's not working. And maybe there's advent of new technologies. Maybe there's new supplies available that weren't available at the start of the program. Get those things in so you could incorporate them into your program and not be and get the full benefit out of it. So, take to the committee recommendation. So the Rural Groundwater Committee recommends that the Rural Groundwater Management Area Framework be submitted to the governor as a foundation of the new groundwater management area. So basically, all the components we just discussed are kind of encapsulated in the recommendation. So, and then the final proposal for the Rural Groundwater Committee was recommendations on measuring and reporting. So I won't read these all out to you. Basically, it says that they're recommending that Arizona Department of Water Resources should pursue additional measuring and monitoring, collects groundwater area, data from these areas in the rural areas. Also, they're recommending that they collect additional data in newly formed areas like the Douglas Active Management Area and the and INA areas that have been recently formed. The thought is that we need as much data as possible if you're going to make this framework be as successful as you want it to be. Arizona Department of Resources said they appreciate that and they're willing to do that, but there has to be funding involved with that, because with their current funding and their current priorities, they're doing the monitoring and the measuring that they're doing based on those existing budgets, and they need a financial component of this if it's going to be increased. The second two bullet points refer to proposals that ADWR provide financial assistance for non-exempt well for the installation of measuring devices in exchange for voluntary annual reporting information. So again, this would be almost like a rebate program. If a user was to install a measuring device on their well and was willing to give annual reporting of it, they would get reimbursed for that measuring device and the cost of installation of it. So that was a proposal to initiate a program through ADWR to see if they could support that. And then the last bullet point is financial assistance for non-exempt well measuring devices in the newly regulated areas. So Douglas AMA and INA. So with that, that is basically the presentation I have here today. That next steps. Again, they're moving this forward. ADWR is looking at creating rules. Oh, and I should say, the director of ADWR forwarded a letter to the governor with all of these recommendations encapsulated. So that has been done at this point in time. And they're starting the informal rulemaking process. It would then be a formal rulemaking process would follow, which would they estimate would take 6 to 8 months in order to move forward, unless there's some legislative expediting. There are processes that can actually do an expedited process, but it's unknown at this time if any of those will be available for this. Both of these committees have been told thank you for their hard work, but to expect at some time here in the future, in the next 2 to 3 months, that they will be called again as they get more and more data from the stakeholders that they're going to be looking at when they're looking at these rulemaking steps, and to come back and try to get through some of the last hurdles and challenges that are needed for these recommendations.
Well, thank you. That was very intriguing. I'm glad to see the governor's office is making some movement towards resolving our water issues during this, I guess it's 30 years now of drought and decreasing allocations from the Colorado River, falling groundwater levels, wells drying up, increasing population and water use or requirements. Could you email us a copy of your PowerPoint presentation
Definitely.
so we can review it some more.
I'll give you a summary email of what's happened at the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll attach the letter that the director sent over to the governor.
And appreciate some updates as to the status of these regulations, how they're advancing. Is there any public comment? Peter?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gambogi, any comments?
I have no comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And there will be no Water Issue Subcommittee for January, so our next meeting will be the first Tuesday in February. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.